Deuteronomy chapter 29, of course, we saw that this was a second covenant. It's not attached to the national covenant, but it is a separate covenant. And last week we talked about how that it wasn't just for the nation of Israel, but its blessings and its curses would be applied to anybody, whether they were in the nation of Israel and whether or not they were present at the time that they gave it to Israel. So it's something like, say, salvation, for an example. We can preach salvation in this church, but it doesn't mean that, and this church can receive it, and they should receive salvation, but it doesn't mean that salvation is only for this church. So same way with the nation of Israel. This covenant was given to the nation of Israel, but it didn't mean it was only for the nation of Israel. And so the blessing and cursing is for all people. So that's why the scriptures, remember last week we talked about how that it was in chapter 29, verse 15, but with him that standeth here with us today before the Lord our God, and also with him that is not here with us this day. So the covenant of the nation of Israel at Mount Sinai, that was for the nation of Israel to become a servant nation of God. And that was for them specifically. That was for them to follow and obey. But this is the second covenant, which is for all people, that God made with them. It is the covenant, the New Testament calls the covenant of faith. It is also referred to in the book of Romans, of course, the covenant, it is the law of faith or the word of faith. Because we talked about how that Romans chapter 10 is based off of the verses in that we read last week in chapter 29, based upon how that the word of faith is not far away where you have to search it out, or you have to go to heaven to try to find it, or go down to the depths of the sea, or across the sea, or down in the depths of hell to find it and to bring up the message of Christ from above or below or from far away. But rather God has spoken the word of faith unto all the world. He has spoken it unto all the people, and they have heard it, and it's gone into all the world. The gospel has gone to all the world. The word of faith has gone to all the world. And so it says, nigh to thee. It is nigh to thee. Especially in the nation of Israel, it was nigh to them more than it was to people around the world, because God specifically spoke it to them. But Paul the Apostle called it the word of faith, the law of faith. It says, do we make void the law? God forbid. No, we established the law. But what law was he talking about? He was not talking about the national law only, but rather he was talking about establishing the law of faith. And James also calls it the law of liberty. Remember how we talked about how that in the last week, how that if you chose Christ, if you chose God, if you chose life, you would have this liberty, you would have this blessing, you would have this privilege, they would have this great ability. But if they chose death, or they rejected Christ or rejected God, they would have this curse upon their life. And so, in Christ we have all spiritual blessings. And so here in Deuteronomy we are learning about this. And of course we learned about how that rock which followed them in the wilderness, that rock was Christ. And so it's important to understand all that this Deuteronomy, the second covenant, is the foundation of faith. The reason why that generation that exited Egypt, the reason why they did not make it into the promised land was because faith was not mixed with them. They didn't have it in faith. That's what Hebrews tells us. They didn't have that faith. And where did was that faith found? Moses, before they go into the promised land, tells this new generation that replaced the old generation that in order for you to have victory, you need to have this covenant of faith. You need to have this, something that God has given to everybody. You also need to have it. You can't just be servants of God. You also must have the covenant of faith. And so a lot of times people get confused, and they think, even today, that just because there's a nation in Israel, this Jewish nation of Israel that's in there in the New Testament, that just because they have the servant covenant, that they also automatically have the second covenant. But no, we see that generation that died in the wilderness only had the servant covenant, but they didn't have the covenant of faith. Therefore, that was the faith that in Abraham all nations shall be blessed, is through that faith of Abraham. That's what the New Testament tells us, through the faith of Abraham. Not through the national covenant of Abraham, but through the faith of Abraham, that faith covenant. And so In blessing I will bless thee, and cursing I will curse thee, is that promise is not just to the nation of Israel, but it's to a believing nation of Israel, to a nation that also has the second covenant. And so we need to understand that the covenant of faith is not just a New Testament concept that replaces the servant covenant of Israel, but rather it is a second covenant that is in addition to the national covenant of Israel. So the nation of Israel can have its servant covenant was just for them as a nation, and you can join that nation or whatever according to Acts chapter 15, but you don't have to join that nation in order to have the second covenant. You don't have to have it. And so that's important to understand, that the covenant is not based upon the nation covenant of Israel. And in verse 30, I believe we did... The verse 30 was worth the verse 12, it is not in heaven that thou shouldst say, who shall go up for us into heaven and bring it down unto us that we may hear it. And of course that's Romans chapter 10. We talked about how that was based upon this passage that Romans was using, the foundational passage to establish the law. It's the law of faith that he was establishing, not the law of the national covenant. Chapter 31 is now where we're going to be studying, chapter 31 and 32 today. If we can get that far, I'm going to try to make it through that way. We don't have too many parts. But here in chapter 31 it says, and Moses went and spake these words unto all Israel. So God tells him what to speak to the nation of Israel, and then he goes and tells them. And so he says, he spake all these words unto all Israel. And he said unto them, I am 120 years old this day. I can no more go out and come in. Also the Lord hath said unto me, thou shalt not go over this Jordan. Remember, he's a picture of the servant covenant, the covenant of bondage. You know, the second covenant, the covenant of faith, is the covenant of blessing and liberty and faith and freedom. The first one, the servant covenant, is earthly, and the second covenant is heavenly. And so we need to be careful to understand that that's why there is the national covenant and then the second covenant in Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy means second law or second covenant. But here we go. I said unto them, 120 years, I cannot go over this Jordan. The Lord thy God, he will go over before thee, and he will destroy these nations from before thee, and thou shalt possess them. And Joshua, he shall go over before thee, as the Lord hath said. So we have him going before the people, going before the nation. And remember this, that the Lord was with that nation. And if you look at Balaam's prophecies, we're not going to study those right now, but Balaam was looking at Israel. He was actually looking at the Lord and going over. And so there's a lot of interesting prophecy with Balaam. But anyway, and verse 4, and the Lord said unto them, as he did to Sihon and to Og, king of the Amorites, and unto the land of them whom he destroyed. And the Lord said, shall give them up before your face, that ye may do unto them according to all the commandments which I have commanded you. Be strong and of good courage, fear not, nor be afraid of them, for the Lord thy God, he that goeth before thee, and he will not fail nor forsake thee. And Moses called unto Joshua and said unto him in the sight of all Israel, be strong and of good courage, that thou must go with the people unto the land which the Lord hath sworn unto their fathers to give them, and thou shalt cause them to inherit it. And so in order for them to inherit the land, they have to have the second covenant. They have to be believers. That first generation that didn't have the second covenant, they died in the wilderness. Their carcasses fell in the wilderness, the Bible says. And so here we see that the inheritance of the land and courage comes from the covenant of faith, not from the servanthood law, and so forth. And the Lord, he is that doth go before thee. He will be with thee. He will not fail thee, neither forsake thee. Fear not, neither be thou dismayed. So we see that for the Lord to go with them, they had to have the second covenant. If they want to go over into the promised land and receive it, the Lord has to be with them. And that presence of the Lord is through the second covenant. And Moses wrote this law and delivered it unto the priests, the sons of Levi, which bear the ark of the covenant of the Lord, and to all the elders of Israel. And Moses commanded them, saying, at the end of every 7 years, in the solemnity of the year, the release, in the feast of tabernacles. And so every 7 years they had to read the law of Moses, the law of Deuteronomy, the book of Deuteronomy. And it's the Levites, and it's set beside the mercy seat. And if you remember, where did Jesus Christ go and shed his blood at? Where he sprinkled his blood upon the mercy seat. Why? Because this book of the law is beside the mercy seat, is equal with the mercy seat. And remember, the national covenant is inside the ark. This is beside it. So anyway, when all Israel is come to appear before the Lord thy God into the place which he shall choose, thou shalt read this law before all Israel in their hearing, the hearing of faith. Whoso heareth, let him understand. So gather the people together, men and women and children, and thy stranger that is within thy gates, that they may hear and that they may learn and fear the Lord your God, and observe to do all the words of this law. So notice this, that the first covenant, the national covenant, is one of, you're born into it. You're born a servant of the Lord because you're born into that nation. That's why you have the covenant of circumcision, is because you are part of that nation. They're circumcised. Gentiles did not need to be circumcised. It was only the people in that first covenant. They were born into it. But here, it is by the hearing of faith. The Deuteronomic covenant read every 7 years before all of the people, whether young or old. And of course, this is the covenant that they read to the children of Israel when they returned into the land after Babylonian captivity. Ezra read it and so forth to them. And so in their hearing, whether they were young or old, and that they may hear. So this second covenant is not based upon servant covenanthood or birth. It is based upon the hearing of faith. And that their children which have not known anything may hear and learn to fear the Lord your God as long as you live in the land, whether you go over to Jordan to possess it. And the Lord said unto Moses, behold, thy days approach that thou must die. Call Joshua and present yourselves to the tabernacle of the congregation. And congregation there means, in the New Testament, means church, the tabernacle of the church, of the congregation, that I may give him a charge. And Moses and Joshua went and presented themselves in the tabernacle of the congregation. And so notice that the leaders are going to be charged of God from the church. And so we need to charge, that gives us an indication today that we need to charge our leaders with the faith. We need to charge them to have faith in God, to lead the nation faithfully before God. And so that's a call for the church to do that. The nation doesn't tell the church what to do. The church tells the leaders what to do. So even though he's going to lead the nation of Israel, he had to go to the congregation. Then the nation had the servanthood covenant from God. The congregation had the Deuteronomic covenant from God. Remember, he gave it to the Levites, the national church of Israel. And the Lord appeared into the tabernacle in a pillar of cloud. And a pillar of the cloud stood over the door of the tabernacle. So the Lord is in the tabernacle. And the Lord said unto Moses, behold, thou shalt sleep with thy fathers, and this people will rise up and go a-whoring after the gods of the strangers of the land, whether they go to be among them, and will forsake me and break my covenant which I have made with them. So he's made their covenant, the servanthood covenant, and so forth. And then he says, don't forget, they're going to rise up. God is prophetically speaking of the children of Israel. Now, what's interesting about this is he's saying that the nation of Israel is going to rise up and forsake him. But yet when God made the covenant with the covenant with Abraham, he says, for I know thy children, that they'll keep my law. So that means the children of Abraham are the children of faith. But here, the national covenant of Israel, those people that have that covenant, he says, they're going to forsake me. But it's the children of faith that hold the Deuteronomic covenant, that they're going to actually be the ones that uphold the law of Abraham, the promises given to Abraham. And so that's, I believe, is found in Genesis, if I remember correctly. maybe 13. No, I should have written it down, but anyway. Let's go with I think maybe 18, but let's see here. Okay, Genesis chapter 18, verse 18. And the Lord said, shall I hide from Abraham that thing which I do? Seeing that Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him. For, verse 19, for I know him that he will command his children and his household after him, and they shall keep the way of the Lord and do justice and judgment. Notice that justice and judgment is based off there. And the Lord may bring upon Abraham that which he hath spoken of him. And so we see there that Abraham's children are going to keep justice and judgment. They're going to keep the law. And so basically that means that it's not just based upon the national covenant law. It has to be based upon the covenant of faith. And so those that he's speaking about, the children of Abraham, are those that go off into eternity. You know, when you go into the kingdom, you're going to sit down with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, and he's not the God of the dead, but the God of the living. And so therefore his children that he's talking about is his eternal children, and those children are going to keep it. But here the national covenant, those people that just have the national covenant, he says in Deuteronomy, the Lord said to Moses, behold, thou shalt sleep with thy fathers, and verse and whether they go among them and will forsake me and break my covenant which I had made with them. So this is Deuteronomy chapter 31, verse 17. And then my anger shall be kindled against them in that day, and I will forsake them, and I will hide my face from them, and shall be devoured, and many evils and troubles shall befall them. So they will say unto in that day, are not these evils come upon us, because our God is not among us? And so here we notice, of course, the choose life and the choose faith, and he will not forsake thee. If they had faith in God, he wouldn't have forsaken them. But if they only have the national covenant and they can break that national covenant, then God's not going to be with them. You see through the Old Testament, he says, I'm tired of your sacrifices and all these things because your heart is not with me. You draw close to me with your mouth, but your heart is not with me. And we're going to look at that in the New Testament as well with the Pharisees and the Levites. They all had an appearance of serving the nation, but they didn't have faith that was supposed to be with it. And he says, are not the evils come upon us because our God is not among us? How are they going to have God with them? Not just by holding the servant covenant, but rather by holding the covenant of faith. Because if they have the covenant of faith, God will never leave thee nor forsake thee. But here, he's left and forsaken the nation. How oftentimes in the Old Testament we say, I'm not going to hear your prayers, I'm not going to hear your cries. Why? Because they didn't have it mingled with faith. Verse 18, and I will surely hide my face in that day for all the evils which they shall have wrought. Remember the imaginations of their heart we talked about the last week? And that they are turned out into other gods. Now therefore, he says, because they're going to do this, because they're not going to hold faith, I want them to have this covenant read every 7 years at the tabernacle. The Feast of Tabernacles, and he says, therefore write ye this song for you, and teach it the children of Israel, put it in their mouths, that this song may be a witness for me against the children of Israel. He said, basically he's telling them the national covenant, the servant covenant, is not going to protect you from my wrath. You have to have this covenant of faith. And in order for you to know that, I want you to sing it to them. I want you to speak it to them. Remember the hearing of faith. For when I shall have brought them into the land, which I swear unto their fathers, that floweth with milk and honey, and they shall have eaten and filled themselves with wax and fat, then will they turn into other gods, and will serve them and provoke me, and break my covenant. We saw that throughout the Old Testament, how that they turned to other gods, and they provoked him to anger, and so forth. That nation that were supposed to be servants provoked him to anger. And it shall come to pass, when many evils and troubles are befallen them, that this song shall testify against them as a witness, for it is not forgotten out of the mouth of their seed. Their seed, the physical seed. For I know their imaginations which they go about, and even now before I have brought them into the land which I swear. Moses therefore wrote this song the same day, and taught it to the children of Israel. And he gave Joshua the son of Nun a charge, and said, Be strong and of a good courage, for thou shalt bring the children of Israel into the land which I swear unto them, and I will be with thee. Remember, that charge is the beginning of Joshua. Be strong and of good courage. As for me and my household, I will serve the Lord. And so we see that Joshua made that charge, received that charge, and followed it. But that charge is not based upon the servant covenant, but rather on the Deuteronomy covenant. It's within Deuteronomy, that charge. And it came to pass, when Moses had made an end of writing the words of his law in a book, until they were finished, that Moses commanded the Levites, which bear the ark of the covenant of the Lord, saying, Take this book of the law, and put it into the side of the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God, that it may be there for a witness against thee. For I know that thy rebellion and thy stiff neck, behold, while I am yet alive with you this day, that ye have been rebellious against the Lord, and how much more after my death. And as a side note as well, I was just thinking about this, is that first law, the from Mount Sinai that Moses wrote in a book, he sprinkled that with animals' blood. And the second law, there's no mention of it being sprinkled with the blood of animals. And so that's when Jesus goes to the mercy seat and sprinkles his blood, that supersedes the blood of the animals. But anyway, let's move on. Verse 28, Gather unto me all the elders of your tribes and your officers, that I may speak these words in their ears, and call heaven and earth to record against them. Remember, heaven and earth is recording against them. And for I know that after my death you will utterly corrupt yourselves, and turn aside from the way which I have commanded you, and evil will befall you in the latter days. Because you will do evil in the sight of the Lord, and to provoke him to anger through the work of your hands. And Moses spake in the ears of all the congregation of Israel the words of the song until they were ended. And so chapter 32 gives us the verses of the song. It says, Give ear, O ye heavens, and I will speak. Notice he's calling upon the heavens to give ear. So notice that when the hearing of faith is not just for the children of Israel, but of course they were supposed to be a light into the world. It was not just for them, but it was for the whole heavens. Give ear, O heavens, the whole earth. Give ear, O ye heavens, and I will speak, and hear, O earth, the words of my mouth. So the calling of faith. My doctrine shall drop as the rain, my speech shall distill as the dew, and the small rain upon the tender herb, and as the showers upon the grass. Because I will publish the name of the Lord, ascribe ye greatness unto our God. So it starts with the publishing of the name of the Lord. Ascribing is about writing the greatness of our God. So publish and write this law. He is the rock. Oh, where do we see that from? The New Testament. That rock was Christ. And so notice this, that the song that God tells him to write about the second covenant starts out with, He is the rock. He is the rock. Not Dwayne Johnson, but the rock, which is Christ. And so he's speaking about the Lord. And so this second covenant is based upon the rock that led the children of Israel. The Bible says that out of Egypt have I called my son. Well, when did he call Egypt his son? And he says that Israel, when he was before Egypt, before Pharaoh, he told the Pharaoh, Israel is my son. And that Israel was and Jacob's name was changed to Israel when he had faith in the Lord, when he wrestled with the Lord, the rock, his rock. He says, So there's a lot of doctrine about the rock in the Bible, and it's not from the New Testament, it's from the Old Testament about the Messiah, the Christ, the servant of the Lord, the rock of the Lord. And that is because it's about the Christ, the Messiah. So he says, because I will publish the name of the Lord, ascribe ye greatness unto our God. He is the rock, which his work is perfect. He has a complete work. He has completed the work. For all his ways are judgment. A God of truth and without iniquity, just and righteous is he. In Romans it tells us that he will judge all things by the gospel, by Jesus Christ. In fact, let me look at that, Romans chapter 1. Actually, let's go with Romans chapter 2, verse 16. Which show the works of the law written in their hearts, their conscience also bearing witness, and their thoughts, meanwhile accusing or excusing one another, in the day when God shall judge the secrets of men by Jesus Christ according to my gospel. And so here it talks about the rock. He's going to judge. His ways are judgment. He's going to judge according to Jesus Christ through the gospel. And the gospel based upon Deuteronomy here. A God of truth and without iniquity, just and righteous is he, this gospel for all the world. And they have corrupted themselves. Their spot is not the spot of his children. So notice there, he's talking about the national covenant, those in the national covenant of Israel. He says the rebellious part of those, remember there's either going to be choosing of righteousness, the believing nation of Israel, or the choosing of unrighteousness, those that follow after their imaginations that lead the children away. He says that generation, and we're going to talk about this some more this morning's message, the generation of vipers, those whose father is not Abraham, the father of faith, but rather their father is the devil. This generation, this spiritual generation of wickedness, he says they have corrupted themselves. Their spot is not the spot of his children. Those of faith are his children. Abraham is his children, children of Abraham. You know, they could raise up stones to the children of Abraham because of faith. They are a perverse and crooked generation. Notice that this is a different generation than the generation of God's children. So he's talking about spiritual generations. You have the ones that follow the rock, capital R-O-C-K, and then you have those who have a spot that is not the spot of their children. Remember, the spot is a mark. You know, and Cain had the mark of the devil. You know, had that mark upon his forehead. So too, that the spot here is not the spot of his children, but rather it's the spot of the devil. So there's a different generation. They are perverse and crooked generation. Their second generation is a spiritually corrupt generation. Do ye thus requite the Lord, O foolish people, and unwise? Is not thy Father that hath bought thee? Hath he not made thee and established thee? Notice this, he's calling children, as in the children of God, and then the Father, in referring to God the Father. Is not he thy Father that hath bought thee? Hath he not made thee and established thee? Remember the days of old, consider the years of many generations. Ask thy Father, and he will show thee thy elders, and they will tell thee. So they're going to tell you this gospel. When the Most High divided the nations, their inheritance, when he separated the sons of Adam, he set the bounds of the people according to the number of the children of Israel. So there's going to be this nation that he's establishing is going to have authority over all the earth. And it's going to be divided up into 12 districts, if you will. 12 nations, 12 tribes. And so that servant covenant is based upon their nation. Is going to definitely rule the earth. But he says here, that's when he divided the nations. That would be Genesis chapter 10, is that table of nations. For the Lord's portion is his people, but yet there's going to be a portion that is not just the nations and stuff, but his people. He's going to have a portion for himself. There's going to be a portion that is of himself. When the Most High divided the nations, their inheritance, when he separated the sons of Adam, he set the bounds of the people according to the number of the children of Israel. For the Lord's portion is his people, Jacob is the lot of his inheritance. So his portion in his inheritance. He founded him in a desert land, and in a waste howling wilderness he led them about. He instructed him. He kept him as the apple of his eye. As an eagle stirreth up her nest, fluttereth over her young, spreadeth abroad her wings, taketh them, and beareth them on her wings. So the Lord alone did lead them, and there was no strange God with them. And as a side note, remember in Matthew chapter 23, the Lord said that He wanted to take him as a hen gathereth her chicks. He wanted to take them under his wings, but they would not. They refused him. But it says here, the eagle stirreth up her nest and fluttereth over her young, spreadeth abroad her wings. Is that same picture? And the Lord alone did lead them, and there was no strange God with him. He made him to ride on high places of the earth, that he might eat the increase of the fields, and he made him to suck honey out of the rock, and oil out of the flinty rock. Butter of kine, and milk of sheep, and fat of lambs, and rams of the breed of Bashan, and goats with the fat of kidneys of wheat. And thou didst drink the pure blood of the grape. But Jeshurun is that righteous nation, those righteous people. Jeshu is the upright, and then Ron there means the people. In Chinese, it would be Waigo Ron is the white people, basically the foreigners. And so here, though it's the same sort of symbolism, is the Jeshurun is the righteous people, and Jeshurun is there similar to also Joshua, the people of Joshua. Jeshurun and Joshua is the upright, the Savior, and so forth. So salvation through uprightness. So Jeshurun means that. It's a symbolic name of the righteous people of Israel. Those people that are supposed to be righteous in the nation of Israel. But Jeshurun waxed fat and kicked, and thou art waxen fat, thou art grown thick, thou art covered with fatness. And he forsook God, which made him and lightly esteemed the rock of his salvation. So this generation that had received the Lord and were righteous, they went into the land, but they waxed fat. And the nation of Israel, after that generation that went into Israel with Joshua. After Joshua died, the next generation, they turned away from the Lord. That first generation with Joshua went into the land. They never turned away. They were faithful until their generation was over. But that generation they raised up, because they had waxed fat, they had ignored the things of God, and that next generation had turned away from the Lord. And this is all prophetic. But anyway, but Jeshurun is that picture of the upright people, and lightly esteemed the rock of his salvation. They didn't make it as serious with their children as they should have. They provoked him to jealousy with strange gods, and with abominations provoked him to anger. And they sacrificed unto devils and not to God, and gods whom they knew not, and new gods which came newly up, whom their fathers feared not. And then verse 18, of the rock that begat thee, thou art unmindful, and thou hast forgotten God that formed thee. So it's the salvation they had forgotten. And when the Lord saw it, he abhorred them because of the provoking of his sons and his daughters. So remember, the unrighteous generation always provokes the righteous generation, just as Ishmael provoked Isaac, and so forth. So the provoking of his sons. The Lord was upset with this generation, this wicked generation, because they were provoking the true generation in Israel. Remember, not all Israel is Israel, according to Paul the Apostle. He said, I will hide my face from them. I will see that their latter end shall be, for they are a very forward generation, children in whom there is no faith. A forward generation in whom there is no faith. This generation that is coming up with the children of Israel. The righteous generation is being taken over by this ungodly generation. And this is the same picture of the parable that Jesus spake, where he says, let the tares grow up with the wheat. And at the end, when the harvest comes, he's going to clear those tares out, and then they will only be the wheat that is left. But here it says, they have moved me into jealousy with that which is not God. They have provoked me to anger with their vanities, and I will move them to jealousy with those that are not a people, or provoke them to anger with a foolish nation. And what is that people? Peter tells us that this people that were not a people are now the people of God. It is basically the children, the Gentile believers that come into the New Testament, that is a foolish nation. I will provoke them with a foolish nation. And so we we are to provoke the children of Israel to jealousy, is what the Bible says. The Christians are supposed to encourage the nation of Israel to believe on the Lord Jesus Christ, and to by our righteousness to outshine the righteousness of the nation of Israel, because we are the believers. And that is the spiritual nation needs to provoke the physical nation to following after the Lord. For a fire is kindled in mine anger, and shall burn into the lowest hell. Now the fires of hell are kindled by the wrath of God. And so that is, he created for the devil and his angels, but it's kindled by his wrath. For he shall burn into the lowest hell, and shall consume the earth with her increase, and set on fire the foundations of the mountains. So their blessing is going to be turned into cursing because of what they are doing. I will heap mischiefs upon them. I will spend my arrows upon them. They shall be burnt with hunger and devoured with burning and with bitter destruction. I will also send the teeth of the beast upon them, and with poison of the serpents of the dust. The sword without and terror within shall destroy both the young and man, and the virgin and suckling also with many gray hairs. And I would scatter them into the corners. I would make the remembrance of them to cease from among men. Were it not that I feared the wrath of the enemy, lest their adversaries should behave themselves strangely, lest they should say, our hand is high, and the Lord hath not done all this. So the reason why the nation of Israel is still there, even though they're in unbelief, is because God doesn't want the nations to mock his power. He's still going to protect that nation, even though his wrath is upon them, because he wants to, upon the wicked generation's wrath is there. He wants to honor his name, glorify his name, so that he shows the protection. But anyway, for they are a nation void of counsel, neither is there any understanding in them. So, and that they were wise, that they understood this, that they would consider their latter end. How should one chase 1,000? So if they followed in faith, they would be one person would chase 1,000, and two would put 10,000 to flight. See, that's a force multiplier. Is if they had faith with their servant, if they were nation of Israel had faith, then one person could chase 1,000, two 10,000. So that means three 100,000. So four could chase 1,000,000. Except their rock had sold them, and the Lord had shut them up. For their rock is not as our rock, even as our enemies themselves being judges. Now, this important part here is that the enemies themselves being judges. The enemies of the Lord and the enemies of Israel are judging them. How much today you turn on the news and how much of it is judging the nation of Israel? They say, no, the nation of Israel shouldn't be doing this, shouldn't be doing that. He prophetically said that the nations around the world would be judging Israel. They'll be looking at Israel, and they say, are they following after the Lord in righteousness, or are they doing their own thing in imaginations of their heart? It's a judgment test. So we're running out of time here, so we're going to finish here, and we'll finish this next week. But here next week we're going to be looking at this rock of the Lord, and it's going to be comparing. He's going to say their rock is not as our rock, and so we're going to be discerning the generation of the righteous, the Jeshurun, versus the generation, the evil generation. So we're going to look at that a little bit more detailed next week, and I think it'll be very important to discern this, because yes, the nation of Israel has blessings because they're national covenant, but their blessings and their cursings upon them, the empowerment that they have, is based upon the Deuteronomy covenant, the second covenant, the covenant of faith. If they don't have faith, then they will not be able to chase 1,000 and 10,000, put many to flight. We see the little hints of this because whenever people go against the nation of Israel, they are defeated generally. But we'll talk more about that next week. It's quite interesting how these two covenants played out together. But with that, let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this passage you gave to us, Lord, the opportunity to consider your word. Let us pray that you'll help us understand the importance of having not just a national covenant, not just a church, not just a community of faith, but rather faith itself within our hearts, Lord. I pray that we will follow the correct rock and not seek after a rock of our own imagination. Lord, I pray that you'll just be with us as we consider your word, and just I pray. Amen.